James Nachtwey is an American photojournalist who was born on March 14, 1948 in Syracuse, New York. He grew up in Massachusetts and graduated from Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, where he studied art history and political science. James said that he was influenced by work of photographers during the Vietnam War and actually taught himself photography and how to be a photojournalist. He landed his first job with a newspaper in New Mexico in 1976. After 4 years of working in New Mexico, James moved to New York City to work as a freelance photographer. This is where he joined Black Star Agency. Black Star Agency is a photography agency that offers photojournalism, corporate assignment photography, and stock photography. James's first foreign assignment was to cover civil strife in Northern Ireland during the IRA hunger strike. And this is one of the pictures he took during that assignment. This is another photograph that James took during that assignment, which shows a truck hijacked by Catholic demonstrators during the hunger strike. James's main work was around the 1980s, or 1984 when he joined Time magazine. This was around the same time as famous photojournalists Steve McCurry, Kevin Carter, Carol Guzzi, or Eddie Adams, although Eddie Adams was maybe a bit before his time. In a 1991 interview, James stated that he used the Nikon FM2 and the Nikon F3P. These were both 35mm SLR cameras, which were released in 1982 and 1983. When James became one of the founding members of photo agency 7 in 2001, they formed a partnership with Canon, which meant he had to start using Canon cameras. The first Canon camera that he chose to use was the Canon EOS 1N. He then moved on to the EOS 1V, and then finally to the EOS 1DS, which was the first full-frame DSLR by Canon. This is one of James Nachtwey's photographs, which I will assess with the photographic, artistic, and compositional principles. The first principle is the quality of light. The light is clearly coming from the right of the screen and looks like a very soft light, so this may be artificial light created by the photographer. The quality of light also brings out the scars on his face, which makes the photo more dramatic. The next principle is rule of thirds. The subject is clearly in the right side of the picture, the right third. I think this is good because it allows you to focus on this 1/3 of the picture and actually focus on the scars on his face. And your eyes are automatically drawn here as soon as you look at the picture. The third principle is texture. Now the quality of light really brings out the texture in the side of his face to show you how bad these scars really are. This is important because it really shows you how bad the situation was that he's been in. James's initial motivation was the work he saw of the photographers during the Vietnam War. His motivation nowadays, or when he was a photojournalist in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, was to give the public the truth and to show the real point of view. He quotes in a TED speech, "Our political and military leaders were telling us one thing, and photographers were telling us another. I believed the photographers, and so did millions of other Americans." Another great quote from the same TED speech, James says, "I understood that documentary photography has the ability to interpret events from their point of view. It gives a voice to those who otherwise would not have a voice, and as a reaction, it stimulates public opinion and gives impetus to the public debate, thereby preventing the interested parties from totally controlling the agenda, much as they would like to." I picked these quotes because I think they really show the importance of James's mission as a photojournalist. He's not a photojournalist to make money or just to complete assignments on time. He does it because he wants to open the eyes of people and to help people in these bad situations. And this leads me on to ethics. James's motivation and ethics are fairly similar. Some might argue that he is the exploiter of victims, but James insists that he does what he does to open people's eyes. James quotes, "The worst thing is to feel as a photographer that I am benefiting from someone else's tragedy. This idea haunts me." Now, yes, he's getting paid, but this isn't the main reason for his photography of these bad situations. There is a documentary about James Nachtwey called War Photographer, and this is a quote he says in the movie. "If everyone could be there to see for themselves the fear and the grief just one time, then they would understand that nothing is worth letting things get to the point where that happens to even one person, let alone thousands. But everyone cannot be there, and that is why photographers go there. They go there to create pictures powerful enough to overcome the deluding effects of the mass media." I think this really sums up James Nachtwey's motivation and ethics in just a few quotes, as he's really trying to help the people in these bad situations. I really would say that James Nachtwey is bias-free. He says that he goes to these places to show his point of view to the world, and to show people the truth. I would say that James's work helps society a lot because it brings light to bad situations and helps those who are unheard to be heard. His photographs help society to see beyond the media and to see the truth about situations without a media filter that we are all so used to. I found this picture and I really needed to share it. This picture shows what I would call a media filter, or what the picture says as a Fox News filter. As you can see, one man is chasing another with a knife, but what the media will show can be totally different to the truth. This is another one of James Nachtwey's photos, which I will be assessing using the principles. The first principle is depth of field. A perfect amount of depth of field is used here, and it's very deep, which allows you to see the amount of graves in the background up to the foreground. The depth of field directs your attention to the main subject, but also allows you to see the amount of graves that surround this one, which leads you to believe that this is something normal, and this is something some of the families in this area experience on a daily basis. The second principle is the background complements. This is similar to what I just talked about, but if the graves weren't in the background or all around this subject, then it wouldn't give the same feel to the photograph. And I feel like the graves around the subject really do complete the picture. The third principle is the subject's expression. Although you cannot see the subject's face, you know that they are in a moment of grieving and they will not pose for this picture. It's hard to relate photojournalism to my major, which is business. At the end of the day, photojournalism is a business if you are making money from it. But there are some photojournalists who have other motivation other than just the money. Of course, James Nachtwey has his critics, like every photojournalist. But these critics don't criticize the quality of the pictures or how he shoots his pictures. The only bad things they have to say are that some of his photos were either too depressing or not nice to look at because some of them are quite graphic. Most people appreciate what he does because he tries to help people, but there are always people who will try to pick out points of what he does because they are either jealous or they just simply don't like his work. It was very hard to find any similarities between James Nachtwey's photography style or photographs that I have taken, so I simply tried to recreate one of his photographs. As you can see, my depth of field was way off, and the lighting was also hard to match. I should have used a deeper depth of field, which would have allowed the fence to have more focus than it does in my picture. This is another one of James Nachtwey's photographs, which I believe Professor Nordell has presented in one of his videos before. The first principle is the exposure time. This must have been a very fast exposure in order to capture the moment without any type of blur. The next principle is abstraction. The type of photo is very strange. You're wondering why this man is on one of the guns of the tank, and it's just a very strange, almost like a shape that he's creating in the air. The last principle is keeping it simple. You can tell that James tried to keep the photograph simple as he got into a low position to take the photograph. This means that there's very little distraction apart from the sky and a tiny bit in the corner. Thank you for watching my photojournalist profile of James Nachtwey.